Like, Meth, come on, get in the car. I'm like, what the I'm not making a connection here. And I'm like, oh, that's Puff car. Ain't no way I'm getting in that fucking car. I look at Pac, and Pac got a whole different.
When asked if he thought Diddy was involved in the shooting, the response came without hesitation. I believe so. There was no flinching, no hedging, just calm, unwavering certainty. The speaker wasn't trying to go viral or fan old flames. It was the kind of statement that lands with weight, the kind that doesn't need yelling to hit hard. Even more shocking was what followed, the claim that they had proof, undeniable, irrefutable proof. But when pressed to share it, the response was firm. That's between me and him. He knows exactly what happened. That statement alone has reignited a decades-old fire. Not just among hip-hop heads, but in federal circles that have long avoided digging too deep into the deaths of Tupac Shakur and the notorious Big. That's where the real tension lies, because for years, Diddy has denied any connection to the events that spiraled out of control in the mid-90s. The music mogul has dodged accusations, lawsuits, and whispers, always managing to come out the other side untouched. But with more people speaking up, people who were there, who knew the players and saw what happened in real time, the cracks in his narrative are starting to show. Every denial Diddy issues seems to spark a ripple effect. For those who believe he played a role, it's not just about what he may have done, it's about the lie they believe he's lived ever since. And when you claim the crown, when you call yourself king of an empire built off the culture, there's a responsibility to live by the code. According to those on the inside, Diddy didn't. And in hip-hop, that kind of betrayal doesn't go unnoticed forever. It's no coincidence that Method Man, one of the most respected and measured voices in the culture, is finally speaking up. He's not known for drama, nor has he ever tried to chase clout through controversy. But when Meth talks, people listen. And what he's saying now adds a chilling layer to the long-standing mystery surrounding Tupac's final months. Meth shared that he and Pac had a deep off-the-record conversation before Pac's murder. It wasn't just about music. It was about survival. Tupac, who at the time had just signed with Death Row Records and was increasingly aware of the dangers closing in around him, confided in Meth. According to Meth, Pac was no longer just dealing with rap beef, he was navigating threats from inside the industry. And one of the names Pac told him to be cautious of, Diddy. Meth didn't elaborate on all the details, but the implication was clear. Tupac believed there were people in powerful positions using their fame to manipulate, coerce, and silence those who wouldn't fall in line. The same names that were being praised on magazine covers and award stages were, according to Pac, orchestrating violence and backdoor deals behind the scenes. Pac didn't mince words. He was blunt. And for Meth, that conversation was hard to forget. In fact, it never left him. Looking back, Meth said the energy that night was heavy, not paranoid-focused. Tupac wasn't spiraling. He was sharpening. He was reading between the lines and seeing how the industry protected certain people while scapegoating others. He felt the walls closing in. He knew too much, and he feared that if he didn't speak now, he might never get the chance. And he was right. Less than 2 months later, Pac was gunned down in Las Vegas. And all the theories, all the rumors, all the finger-pointing began. But few dared to point toward Diddy, not openly, not at first. He was too powerful, too connected. But now, years later, those whispers are turning into voices. Voices that don't care about protecting brands or networks. Voices like Method Man's, who don't need to sensationalize to be believed. And the story they're telling is one that doesn't just challenge Diddy's legacy, it threatens to dismantle it entirely. Because if Pac was right, if the man who built Bad Boy off the backs of street credibility and polished PR was more involved in the chaos than he let on, then the empire he built was never what it seemed. It wasn't just business. It was betrayal. And let's be clear, this isn't some internet conspiracy being regurgitated years later. Tupac and Method Man had a real bond. They linked up for Got My Mind, made up in 1996. And despite the growing tension between coasts, Pac made a point of continuing to work with East Coast artists he genuinely respected. And when it came to Meth, the respect was mutual. Pac always made it known that Method Man was one of the few East Coast voices he trusted. That trust wasn't misplaced. See, even during the infamous East Coast versus West Coast feud, Method Man stood in a rare middle ground. He never took sides, never fed into the beef. While many were quick to align themselves with either Pac or Biggie, Meth kept his head down and stayed focused on the music. He'd worked with Biggie and Diddy before, Sure, but he also had deep admiration for Tupac. He didn't let industry politics or media hype dictate who he respected. That's likely why Pac felt safe enough to speak openly with him, because meth wasn't about the games. He was just trying to navigate the storm without getting pulled under, and now we're learning just how deep that storm ran. Meth recently recalled a time Diddy invited him to leave a party together. At first glance, it seemed harmless, but something didn't sit right. Something felt off. So Meth declined the ride. Looking back, he says that both he and Tupac were living in a constant state of paranoia. And considering what was happening around them, the betrayals, the setups, the lives lost, it wasn't paranoia. It was survival instinct. To understand just how serious all this was, you have to rewind to a moment Method Man shared in an older, recently resurfaced interview. He talked about a night in LA, a night that's now being viewed through a different lens. It was the first time he met both Tupac and Diddy. Same night, same party. Pac walked right up to him and showed nothing but love. But what really stuck with Meth was that Pac brought up the Wu-Tang chain incident. The one where RZA got his chain snatched at Club 662. That moment wasn't just about jewelry, it was about respect, territory, and the shifting lines of loyalty. In the rap game, Method Man has never been one to entertain gossip. He's always moved with quiet strength, handling his business, keeping his integrity intact. Even now, with Diddy facing renewed scrutiny and controversy, Meth hasn't joined the noise, but that old interview is speaking volumes. It's making people revisit old footage, old friendships, old warnings, and wonder just how much of the truth was hiding in plain sight all along. Because when someone like Pac gives you a heads up, it's not just small talk. It's a survival tip. And when someone like Method Man remembers that tip decades later, you have to ask, what really went down behind the scenes of hip-hop's most tragic era?
Come on, at the end of the party over, lights come on, I'm blowed now. I'm like, feel a tap on my shoulder, turn around, it's Pac. Last I ain't seen all night. I ain't know he was even in there. I turn around, Pac there, he's like, yo, I wanna holler at you, anybody. Next thing I know, cameras everywhere. So while he's saying this, I remember something, an altercation happened with RZA in Vegas, something happened with the chain, and Pac was trying to tell me, if I was there, that would never happen, blah, 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 blah. And I remember looking up, and Suge was like this with the cigar in his mouth, looking down at me like this. So I'm like, damn, I just want to play with this. He looking at me crazy right now, So then I look at Pac, and Pac got a whole different face. His face looked like that picture before he died, that face he had, that look. He had that look on his face, you know what I mean? And I remember looking back down, and I couldn't understand anything he was saying after that, because mad was going through my head, and I'm looking at the death row piece on his chain. Then he was like, yeah, we gonna all meet up, and I was like, yeah, you know how men do it. We're handling our business. Walked out. Soon as I walked out the club, Tracy Waples. Love Trey Wap.
Executive label executive, yeah. Worked behind the scenes for a long time.
She outside in a Benz like, Meth.
Not long before Tupac's death, he had a serious conversation with Method Man, one that's now resurfacing with a sense of urgency. According to Meth, the two connected on a deeper level than just music. They were both lyricists, both students of the game, but more importantly, they shared a growing discomfort with the direction hip-hop and the industry behind it was heading. Pac wasn't speaking in vague metaphors. He was specific. He warned Meth about people in the business, who wore masks, who used their wealth, status, and proximity to power as a way to control or even destroy others behind the scenes. And one name that came up in that conversation, Diddy. At the time, that might have seemed like typical rap beef. Pac and Diddy were on opposite ends of one of hip-hop's most notorious rivalries, West Coast versus East Coast, Death Row versus Bad Boy. But now, in light of recent lawsuits, accusations, and leaked testimonies surrounding Diddy's alleged abuse, manipulation, and participation in private industry parties with disturbing undertones, Pac's warning doesn't sound like shade, it sounds like prophecy. Method Man recently recalled the night he met both Tupac and Diddy at a party in Los Angeles. It should have been just another star-studded gathering. Instead, it turned into a turning point. Meth says someone from Diddy's entourage tried to get him into Puff's car. The offer wasn't framed as sinister, just a ride, a hangout, maybe, an invitation to another private spot. But Meth's instincts kicked in. He said no, and looking back, he admitted the vibe was off. Like something in his gut told him this wasn't the move. That moment, once a quiet anecdote, now feels loaded with implication. In the aftermath of recent federal raids on Diddy's homes, accusations from former employees and artists, and stories of coercive environments at exclusive parties, fans are revisiting stories like Meth's with fresh eyes, and they're connecting dots that didn't seem visible before. Meth, to his credit, has always kept his distance from drama. He's built a career on authenticity, staying grounded even as fame surrounded him. But his lyrics, especially on tracks like Suspect Chin Music, have long held clues about what he saw behind closed doors. Lines that criticized hustlers moving backwards, suits with devil smiles, and rappers selling souls for spins now read like quiet shots at the flashy, fabricated world embodied by Bad Boy Records at its peak. As for Tupac, his message was never just about record sales or radio play. In his final interviews, Pac seemed haunted. He spoke about betrayal from within the culture, of being set up not just by enemies, but by people he once called brothers. He hinted at high criminal activity, exploitation, and secret pacts that artists signed unknowingly, sometimes with their silence, sometimes with their lives. It wasn't just paranoia. Pac saw something deeper, something darker. And when he warned Meth to move carefully, he wasn't being dramatic, he was trying to save him. Fast forward to now, and everything Tupac feared is unraveling in real time. Diddy is under the microscope. The parties that once looked glamorous now seem laced with coercion and danger. Artists who were once untouchable are suddenly being investigated, and fans, who used to cheer from the sidelines, are beginning to wonder, what else have we missed? Who else knew and said nothing? In that light, Method Man's decision not to get in that car wasn't just luck, it was survival. It was a rare moment where intuition trumped influence, and it might have kept him from getting pulled into a world that, according to growing testimonies, chewed people up behind velvet ropes and million-dollar smiles. So now, as hip-hop faces a reckoning, as lawsuits stack and stories spill, that quiet conversation between Pac and Meth doesn't feel like rap folklore. It feels like history whispering a truth that was too dangerous to shout back then. And Method Man's story, it's not just a tale from the past. It's a cautionary echo of a culture that, for too long, turned its head while shadows danced in plain sight. Tupac always insisted he was innocent. Not just in a legal sense, but in the way he was being framed by the media, the justice system, and even the industry that once celebrated him. The way society turned its back on him spoke volumes. It wasn't about guilt or innocence. It was about silencing a voice that was too raw, too honest, and too dangerous to the status quo. What happened to Pac wasn't just legal persecution, it was character assassination on a global stage. They painted him as a violent thug, a menace, and a threat to public order, while ignoring the deeper message he carried. He begged us to remember the lack of compassion he received, the silence of those he once trusted, and the cruelty of a system designed to break black men with influence. He swore that if he made it out, he'd protect his people by any means necessary. And now, decades later, we're starting to understand just how prophetic that promise was. A recently resurfaced interview with Suge Knight, one of the few people who knew Pac intimately during those final months, adds another dark layer to the story. Suge claimed Pac was growing increasingly paranoid, not because he was losing touch with reality, but because he was seeing it more clearly than most. Wasn't afraid of rivals or rap battles, he was afraid of powerful predators hiding behind fame and corporate money. According to Suge, Pac had begun investigating rumors and whispers about industry heavyweights who abused their status to exploit others, especially the most vulnerable. These weren't baseless accusations. Pac had names, receipts, and a growing determination to bring those truths to light. Suge said, Pac often expressed concern about men in power who move in silence, describing them as a protected class who operated above accountability. These weren't just industry bullies, these were people with ties to politics, law enforcement, and major media platforms. Pac believed that the public had a right to know who they were really supporting. His disses weren't driven by ego or sales, they were warnings. He saw patterns of grooming, manipulation, and coercion, and he couldn't stand by quietly. In hindsight, it becomes clearer. Pac wasn't picking fights, he was ringing alarms. That's what separates him from most artists of his era. He wasn't content being a superstar, he wanted to be a revolutionary. He wanted to protect his community, especially from the predators hiding behind platinum plaques and luxury suits. His growing awareness of this untouchable network terrified him, and rightly so. Because he knew what happened to truth tellers. He knew what it meant to challenge people who were protected by wealth and whiteness. And still, he spoke out. Tupac Shakur wasn't just a cultural icon, he was a brand, a disruptor, a thinker whose vision extended far beyond beats and rhymes. From the moment he stepped into the spotlight, he carried a weight few others dared to bear. The truth. Not just his truth, but the truth of generations of black men and women beaten down by systemic injustice, corruption, and the invisible hands of power. His lyrics weren't party anthems, they were battle cries. And for that, the system didn't just ignore him, it targeted him. The FBI's 4,000-page surveillance file on Pac wasn't born out of paranoia or coincidence, it was strategy. It was containment? While corporate media spun him as a dangerous thug, law enforcement treated him like a domestic threat. But Pac wasn't a gang leader or cartel boss, he was a poet with a platform. So why the national security level scrutiny? The answer might lie in what Pac was starting to unearth. He wasn't just calling out racism and poverty. He was calling out corruption within the entertainment industry itself. Rumors have long circulated that Pac had begun compiling evidence about exploitation behind the scenes, artists being robbed blind, women being assaulted and silenced, contracts forged in coercion rather than consent. Pac believed there were kingmakers in music and film, powerful men with political connections, who weren't just steering culture, but actively manipulating it to protect themselves and eliminate threats. He suspected there was an entire machine built to suppress dissent and reward silence. And that machine didn't fear violence, it feared exposure. And then there's the contrast that grows starker by the day. Tupac, labeled an enemy of the state, tracked and harassed until his death. Diddy, meanwhile, ascended the industry ranks with open arms from corporate America, even as rumors of misconduct, exploitation, and coercion followed him for decades. He was granted access to elite spaces, brand partnerships, political circles, and pop culture royalty. When whispers turned into lawsuits, and the lawsuits turned into full-blown federal investigations, the question became too loud to ignore. Why was he protected for so long? That's where Method Man's story hits even harder. His account down a seemingly casual offer to ride with Diddy, because something didn't sit right, seemed harmless at the time, but in today's context, it reads more like a near miss. Like an artist's sixth sense warning him away from the type of darkness that doesn't just ruin careers, it ruins lives. If one of the most respected voices in hip-hop, known for keeping his name clean and his head down, is now subtly co-signing the idea that Pac's warnings weren't delusions, then what does that say about the bigger picture?